Most people make the mistake of asking themselves, what can I build end-to-end? And then they make some kind of a workflow or some kind of solution, but there isn't really a problem to solve yet. There's not really a pain point. And then they make the mistake of not asking the other question, which is, what repetitive, exhaustive, expensive, or slow process do I have in my company or in my client's company that I can solve, right? So it's solutions-based thinking versus problem-based thinking, right? So solutions-based is based on, hey, I built a solution. Oh, this sounds like a good idea. Let me go build that. And now let me go to the market and let me see if anyone has this problem. Whereas problem-based is like, hey, let me go talk to the people in the market first, see what problems they have, and then see what I can build for them. Because that way you can solve one problem for one niche over and over and over and over and over again, right? If you build a lead capture or lead generation tool for a realtor, you can copy and paste that system and sell it to other realtors as well. Makes things a lot easier, a lot more scalable as well. In this AI automation overview, I'm gonna take you through my automation architecture, the framework behind it, because I haven't seen anyone else talk about this in a systemized kind of way. It's always like, hey, build this tool, we'll sell it for $5,000 a month. They just purely go into like the technical design of it, like, oh, this is the step you have to do and do that in the end, but they never tell you about what comes before that. They completely skip that part because they assume that you're already an intermediate and that you already understand these underlying basics, but it isn't always very obvious. So in this short video, hopefully short, I'll guide you through the whole system and how to think about being an automation architect, right? Not just, hey, here's the tool I'm gonna use and I'm gonna build this. No, what happens before it? How do you go from a discovery call in the business, from there to showing an MVP or demo, and then to actually get paid for building the full solution? I've gotten this question several times now, where people are like, hey, I have a meeting with a potential client. What do I ask? How do I go about it? I talk about that, and maybe you've already seen it, maybe you haven't yet, about in the business strategy overview. And then, of course, later on, once I have more time to make more content, I'll put it into the business strategy pillar course thing in the classroom. So right now, it's all about how do you figure out what the actual problem is based on what a potential client tells you. Because if you go back to the business overview video, you'll see that I recommend you use the doctor frame. Well, not recommend, you should use the doctor frame, really. And that's more of a client thinks they have a problem. Sometimes they think they have the solution too and want you to do it. But you as a doctor need to figure out, no, actually, after I've asked you some more questions, because trust but verify, turns out those are symptoms, because I think the real underlying cause is this other part of your business. And that's what we should focus on first, because it's easier to solve, right? And that integrates with this AI automation architecture and framework. So it's all integrated. Same goes to the personal growth overview as well. Without further ado, let's go into it. Now, as you can see here, I've got the automation architecture, as I named it, from chaos to control, because it is chaotic, right? Most of these guys online and other school communities tell you, oh yeah, just make an end thing, yada yada, and then you get stuck because you don't know what you're building. You don't know, like, you're wasting hours on trying to invent the wheel, which is stupid. Okay, you should be making the plan beforehand, and that's what I had to go through myself, because I spent lots of hours not knowing what I was doing, inventing the wheel over and over and over again when it came to developing a solution, and then I figured out this framework after a lot of pattern recognition, right? So it's the framework. It will guide all actions. Just like in a business overview, you have a strategy. Just like in a personal growth overview, you have the mindset. Now, first of all, problem-based. What's the desired business outcome, right? Save time, increase leads, decrease time of the process, decrease stress of the business owner or the C-suite or whatever. What's the number one most repetitive manual task? Where does data get lost or anything incorrectly? And what part of the process feels slow or clunky? Now, these are questions you can ask, and that's why I put it over here, in the discovery call. These are valid questions. Now, of course, it differs for the type of client, the type of industry, etc. But these are kind of basic. Once you have these, you kind of know what you're going for already. And then if we go on the other side, when you actually do figure out the solution, you need to figure out what these questions, what the answers are to these questions, right? So, okay, I might have found a problem. What data do I need? What decisions do I need to make? And what decisions do I need the client to also give an opinion on? Because it is their data usually, and it is their company. And these other things, right? But we'll get back to this later. Anyways, my framework exists out of 5 phases. Map, identify, design, architect, and build. Meetup or MIDAP, I suppose. One way to call it, just to make it a bit easier. Now, what you need to understand is this is all chronological. In the other videos, in the other overviews, it's not always chronological, but these actually are. And I also linked them to the business overview, because these 2 phases happen, or these 2 steps in the process happen during the discovery call, and then these 2 happen as part of the MVP or demo, and then you get to the actual fulfillment, which is where you actually build the entire flow, and you get paid for it before you even get to this, right? Just to make it a bit more integrated, just to give you a lot more context to this whole process, because once again, no one talks about this, and it fucking infuriates me, right? So that's why I do it this way. Anyways, mapping it. When you talk to a client and you ask these questions, they either start talking a lot or they just are very short in their answers. So then you got to use, once again, personal growth skill sets, communication, Socratic questioning, cognitive behavioral therapy, tactics in when it comes to the tactics you deploy during conversation like that, to get them to open up a bit more. Because you need to get as much data as possible from your potential client, right? Because then you can visualize the current process. So if I ask, hey, what's the #1 most repetitive manual task? They might say, if they're, chatty, which is great if you have that already. And once again, they're usually chatty when you have built trust with them and they trust you as the expert. So you need to, in the business overview, and there'll be more videos in depth on this, you need to have had a lot of quality small talk and good enough relationship bonding already, even before they get into the meeting, to make sure that they respect you enough to actually be willing to open up to you. Because there are skeptics out there, right? There's people who think AI is scary, they don't trust you with it, what makes you the expert, yada yada yada. So they will tell you about a process or task they have. Like, oh yeah, when we do the invoices, it's kind of annoying, takes us like 4 hours a week, which is kind of a lot. Yeah, when we try to get lead generation, takes a long time. All those types of examples, right? You can think of them yourself as well. Once again, any questions after this video, ask them in the school community, make a post, etc. Or go to the weekly calls. Now, then you can identify every manual step. So let's say he says like, okay, right, I have a process where the process starts over here. It happens when someone leaves the information, so like their email and then their name. And they do this on the website, let's say. They go to the website of the realtor, in this case, and they leave the name and email there in like a survey of some kind. Then the realtor tells you in the discovery call, yeah, and then I myself have to look on my laptop because it doesn't work on my phone for whatever reason, right? Could be a limitation of their software. And then I have to add them to the CRM because there probably isn't even automated, right? Maybe he gets a text or something, that's about it. Then he gets to send them an email. And then he has to, maybe he has some templates, but it's not an automated system yet. Then after the email, he waits 2 days, and then he tries to call them, right? Because let's also assume, because it's real estate, yeah. They also have a phone number. So phone number, call. And then there's 2 choices here. So this is like a so-called gateway where there's 2 options or multiple options. If they do respond, so yes, then book a meeting or a viewing, let's say, right? Because he talks to the client, they're like, oh yeah, looking for this is my budget range, looking in this area, yada yada. If they don't, he waits another 1 day, and then he calls again. And then if nothing happens here again, so again, no contact, then sends an email and that's it. Because clearly this person isn't, according to them, according to the client, clearly my client or potential client is not interested, is what they'll say. Which is bullshit, by the way. Anyways, And then if they do answer, then once again goes to the viewing. And then let's say just keep it simple, that's the end of this process. And then they close the client and they get like a nice commission out of it of like $20,000. Close client, right? This is their process. So once again, you ask the questions to visualize the current process, identify every step, not just manual, but like every step in general, and you follow the data from start to finish, right? That's why I also wrote down email, phone number, name, goes into CRM, then the realtor, so just put this as an R, has to send an email, the realtor has to call, like the realtor does all of this, which is kind of ridiculous, right? And that's it. And then here it also ends because now it's like lost lead. And then you can kind of analyze this already. But for now, what we need to know is that in the conversation, if he tells you this, you can just start drawing, or you can just start, for me, it's visually in my head, so I don't need to do that anymore. But when you're starting out, just have a pen and paper ready just to make notes about this. And that's not a problem at all for the client either. They don't care. They actually respect it if you actually frame it properly. Right? Because they see you putting in the effort. And that's, once again, makes you even more of an expert, and they trust you more because you're putting in the effort. Okay, cool. So now, you've got the process, you've got every manual step, and you know what data comes in. So it's just an email, phone, number, and name, right? Really simple in this case because it's a simple example. And now you've got the so-called as-is process. And in business process management, and there'll be videos on this in more detail later on, you go from the as-is process, you figure out the bottlenecks, you figure out what you can solve, you figure out what you can automate, to the so-called to-be process. And then you have those two situations, and then you have to fill in the gap to get there. And that's what you get paid for. Kind of. So that concludes the mapping part. This is in the discovery call. In the first half, I would say. Because you need to figure this out pretty quick. Then you have to identify.